Hi everybody. So I've been asked, how did I write the O Fortuna solo violin caprice? How did that come about? So I'm going to tell you. As a violinist, Bach is hugely important with his sonatas and partitas for the solo violin. And Bach was a guy who liked a challenge. So in his music, which is full of counterpoint, very polyphonic writing of different separate lines. For example, a sonata, what he wrote for the solo violin, it was a challenge because a sonata is normally played by 2 or 3 different instruments. And of course, if you're talking about the big oratorios, you have entire choruses and symphony orchestras playing as many lines as you like. So for him, the challenge was, how can I reduce all those huge things, all that polyphony, to just one violin? The violin, of course, is a primarily melodic instrument. Of course, there's virtuosity, there's flair, there's all of that, but basically it's an instrument that plays a melody. If you try to program a solo violin recital, there aren't many repertoire options, as opposed to, say, a solo guitar recital or solo piano concert. You can do anything on your own with those instruments, but the violin is really a social instrument in that way, and it needs the others. So to reduce an entire symphony orchestra, say, or a chamber piece, to just the solo violin is a huge challenge. And I think at the time I was looking for more repertoire to do on the solo violin as well, but I also like a challenge. It started out with a question, really. The question was, would it be possible to take this really famous piece of music and do the same kind of process, to reduce it so that only one violin can play it? I thought, if I managed to do that, that would be amazing, because no one's ever done it before with this particular piece of music, and also it would be in line with what Bach had done before, to grab an absolutely massive orchestra, massive choral forces, and to reduce it to just the one violin. So the main bit of the piece is the one that goes with this underneath. I did the introduction later, but I tackled this because it's the main bit of the piece, and if I couldn't make that bit work, then nothing would work. Incidentally, if you find this kind of stuff interesting, I would really appreciate if you subscribe, if you hit the subscribe button down there and the notifications bell. I upload maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, so you won't be full of notifications from me, but when there is something new, you'll get the notification, then you can check it out in your own time. That would be really great. So, to the tune and the accompaniment, what I did first was, when I decided that that's where I was going to start from, I grabbed my old trusty score, the orchestral score of Carmina Burana, which looks ridiculous. It looks like that. There's so many instruments, so many things going on. I thought, how can I do a reduction of this? And there are basically 2 elements. There's the melody and the little motor, the engine underneath. So it's a case of finding out whether each one of those things could be done separately on only one string. For example, if the melody can go on one string and the engine can go on the other one, then at least I don't have to stop at that stage. So I checked it out. The melody, that's 2 notes, yeah. And then it goes higher. So it's in D minor, you've got 5 notes. That's the range. It's a very narrow range, so yes, it can be done on one string. So I looked at the other bit, at the engine, and it goes like this. So the range, I'm looking at the range, is a 4th from the D down to the A. So in theory, both elements can fit in a narrow range that you can plonk each one, you can airlift them down onto each string. I just wrote them down. I think I didn't even use the computer. I just wrote it down on paper just to see what it looks like, because now I had to figure out the mechanics of actually playing the notes together. So here comes the first note of the melody. So you've got at the bottom, and after the first 2 notes you get the first note from the melody. Like that. So slowly, little by little, I just went and looked at what I had written, and I played it to figure out if it was possible to play. And this is exactly the same thing that's going on in Bach's first sonata, Fugue. The theme is... So when the theme comes in the second time, lower in tenor register on the D string, it's possible to play both together. Yeah, like that. A little further into the tune, a few bars in, there are some little quirky things. There are some things that are impossible to actually play to sustain while the other one is working. It's just a technical thing how it falls on the violin. But our dear friend Johann Sebastian Bach also made exceptions. You can find, not in the first sonata, but definitely in the second sonata, and in many, many places in the third and final sonata. You can find places where he's written music which is impossible to play technically, but from a conceptual point of view, they are correct. So when I play it live, as a performer, there are ways you can do little tricks to disguise the fact. It's a bit like a magician when they show you one hand, but they're doing something with the other one. And they're exactly the same kind of tricks, some people call them techniques, that we use when we play Bach as well, just to get around those corners where he's written things that are impossible to play, but the flow of the music still just carries you through. Right, the next bit I did was to think about how I can make that leap. You know, the piece starts really quietly with that big long section, and then it all hell breaks loose. Everyone's really loud. You know, everyone's at full power. So in order to give that effect, I decided to throw everything up an octave. So the quiet bit is all down here, but then I go up an octave for... Yeah? If I do this on the top strings, and I'm doing thirds now, it's impossible, of course, to still be doing on the G string, because you've got the D string in the middle, and because the bridge is curved, it's not possible to make that leap like that. So I had to figure out a different way to give the impression of this big D minor situation. So I just used the open Ds and a little decoration in between. So I found ways around that. The published book has in thirds, but also third, if you flip the interval over, it becomes a tenth. So there's a harder version of tenths, which some people like to play more like in competitions, you know. Personally, I like to play the thirds version. Yes, it's easier, but I find it more satisfying, more musical in a way. Then I had to tackle the introduction, the opening, and for that I used some techniques that I borrowed from Ysaye. I remember after learning a lot of the violin sonatas and partitas, one day my teacher asked me to tackle Ysaye for the first time, and I just looked at that music on the page and I thought, how on earth do you play this? Because Ysaye has chords, you know, Bach has chords of 4 notes, you got 4 strings, fair enough. Ysaye has chords of 6, 7 notes. How on earth do you do that? So by learning to play that and listening to recordings and listening to other people play, Ysaye kind of extends that, yes, in theory, this is the concept, this is the chord, but in practice, you just play one note before another and you kind of do it like that. And it's all in line with the Art Nouveau period that he was creating in. There's beautiful Art Nouveau architecture, of course, still if you walk around Brussels town centre and places like that. And Ysaye's music was a musical expression of that kind of art. So we're miles away from Bach, and it is fair enough to say, okay, here's a 10-note chord, and get it however way you can. So I didn't go to those extremes, but I do go in that direction because you just need certain elements of the harmony, and there's a limited number of strings. So in order to be able to write that and to perform it in a way that still delivers the message that Orff wrote with the full power of the orchestra and the choir at that point on just the 4 strings, you do need to make a little bit of tweaks and a little bit of concessions like that. And for that, Ysaye was my model. If Ysaye came up with that kind of thing and it works, then I thought, well, maybe I can apply that as well. So there's a violin version of the piece, and there's a viola version of the piece. Now, of course, the viola version is a fifth lower, and viola players hate me for treating the viola like a violin a fifth lower. I know it's a completely different instrument, and I would say that the 10th version on the viola is a real push. I haven't heard that anyone do that yet. I've heard the other 3 versions, both violin versions and the viola thirds version. People are doing them and playing them. Do not damage yourself if you want to attempt this. Remember, if you play tenths, you do not stretch this way to find the note. You start with the top note and you pull back, because that's how the human body is natural, in that way. So do not injure yourself, please, attempting this. But if you do want to try it, that's great. Finally, what I did was I showed this to a few big-name violinists who I've worked with, just to see what they thought. They would enjoy playing this. So there are a few people out there who you must know their names, but I don't like to name drop. The only name I will say is James Ehnes, because when James saw this, he absolutely loved it, and he supported me a lot when I then approached Schott with regard to publication. So a huge debt to him, and that's why it's dedicated to him. So that's the story, and it's been very nice to see that a lot of people enjoy playing it, a lot of people enjoy listening to it, a lot of people enjoy watching the video where I'm playing on it. The video that I've got playing it was a very special concert. It was in Japan, and it was a fundraiser and a commemoration concert for the victims of the great earthquake and tsunami of 2011. And I was invited to play in that concert on something called the Tsunami violin, which was an extraordinary thing. In the tsunami, of course, a lot of property and a lot of nature was destroyed. And a violin maker took wood from the trees that had been washed away, cut them up, and made this violin called the Tsunami violin. And at the time there was a project to get 1,000 violinists from all around the world to perform on that violin. So that video that you see of the Carmina Burana, it's on your screen now if you want to go and check it out. That was played on the Tsunami violin, and I feel so honored to have been a part of such an amazing project and of different people's lives in that way. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate if you subscribe, and please leave me comments below. I love to hear from you. Thanks. Till next time.